Have you ever made a decision that felt completely reasonable, until one single discovery made you question everything you believed about yourself? I did. For years, I told myself I was a good son. I paid my mother's bills. I called whenever I could. I visited on holidays. I convinced myself that love could be measured by responsibilities fulfilled instead of moments shared. If someone had asked me whether I loved my mother, I would have answered without hesitation. More than anything. But love has a strange way of exposing itself only after it is tested. And mine failed the moment she quietly packed one small suitcase and smiled at me as I drove her to the nursing home. Looking back now, I wish she had screamed. I wish she had argued. I wish she had called me selfish. Instead, she thanked me. That thank you still echoes louder than any accusation ever could. My name is Daniel. I'm 46 years old, a father of two, owner of a growing construction company, and until recently, I believed success was measured by promotions, bigger houses, and a calendar so full that every empty hour felt like wasted potential. My wife, Rachel, often reminded me how busy life had become. We're doing all this for the family. I repeated those words so many times they became my excuse for everything. Missing birthdays. Skipping dinners. Leaving conversations halfway through because another phone call demanded my attention. Somehow, everyone understood. Except one person. My mother never complained. She simply waited. She waited through cancelled visits. She waited through forgotten weekends. She waited through promises that became apologies. And somehow, she always smiled when I finally showed up. My father had died 15 years earlier. Heart attack. Quick. Unexpected. One ordinary Tuesday morning he kissed Mom goodbye, grabbed his coffee, and never came home. After that, she never remarried. She said she already had the love of her life. No one else could replace him. She stayed in the little blue house where I grew up. The same crooked mailbox. The same rose bushes Dad planted. The same kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon. Whenever I visited, she somehow knew exactly what I wanted to eat before I even asked. I made your favorite. Every single time. It amazed me. Until I realized. Parents never really stop paying attention. Children simply stop noticing. Every birthday, no matter how old I became, she baked me a chocolate cake. Even after I started forgetting my own birthday because of meetings and deadlines. She never forgot. She called exactly at 7:15 every morning. The exact minute I was born. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Not Daniel. Not son. Sweetheart. At first I smiled. Later, I started silencing the calls. Sometimes I'd answer hours later. Sometimes the next day. Sometimes not at all. She never mentioned it. She'd simply say, I figured you were busy. Busy. That word became the shield behind which I hid every failure as a son. Then came the fall. She slipped while watering the garden. A fractured hip. Weeks in the hospital. Months with a walker. Her independence disappeared almost overnight. The doctors warned me. She shouldn't be living alone anymore. At first, I hired caregivers. Morning shifts. Evening shifts. Weekend help. It cost more than I expected, but I could afford it. Money had never been the problem. Time was. Then the caregivers started quitting. Mom insisted she didn't need help. She apologized every time someone cleaned her kitchen. She secretly washed her own laundry because she didn't want anyone working too hard. One caregiver called me after only 6 days. Your mother spends all day pretending she's fine. Another said. She cries after everyone leaves. I didn't believe it. Not because I thought they were lying. Because I couldn't imagine my mother crying. She had spent my entire life protecting me from her sadness. Even when Dad died. She held my hand while I cried. I never once asked who held hers. One evening I stopped by after work. She answered the door slowly. Much slower than before. She looked smaller somehow. As though loneliness had physical weight. I made soup. She smiled. I looked around. The living room was spotless. Family photographs covered every wall. There I was at age 6 with missing front teeth. Age 12 holding a baseball trophy. Graduation. Wedding. The birth of my children. Every chapter of my life framed carefully. But something caught my attention. Her own photographs were almost non-existent. No pictures of vacations. No pictures with friends. No accomplishments. Her entire home was a museum dedicated to everyone else's happiness. Especially mine. We ate quietly. Halfway through dinner she reached across the table and touched my hand. You've lost weight. I laughed. I'm just busy. She squeezed my fingers gently. Don't forget to eat. Imagine that. An 80-year-old woman recovering from a broken hip. Still worrying whether her grown son had eaten lunch. I promised I'd visit the following weekend. She smiled. I'll make your favorite pie. I never showed up. The office had an emergency. At least. That's what I told myself. The next weekend became another excuse. Then another. Then another. 3 months passed faster than I care to admit. When I finally visited again, everything had changed. And I had no idea that the hardest decision of my life was only days away. What if the hardest part of losing someone isn't the day they're gone, but realizing you slowly disappeared from their life while they were still alive? I wish someone had asked me that question before I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. Because if they had, maybe I would have looked a little closer. Maybe I would have noticed the cracks hiding beneath my mother's smile. Maybe I wouldn't have spent the next several years trying to forgive the man staring back at me in the mirror. 3 days after my last visit, my phone rang while I was sitting in a meeting. It was one of Mom's neighbors, Mrs. Collins. She had lived next door for nearly 30 years. When I was a little boy, she always slipped an extra cookie into my lunchbox whenever Mom wasn't looking. Now her voice trembled. Daniel, your mother wandered outside this morning. My stomach tightened. Wandered? She was standing at the end of the street. She looked confused. She thought your father was coming home from work. I closed my eyes. Dad had been gone for 15 years. Mrs. Collins continued softly. She kept asking everyone what time his shift ended. The room around me faded. The meeting. The charts. The people waiting for my opinion. None of it mattered anymore. I drove straight to Mom's house. She was sitting on the porch swing, humming a song Dad used to whistle while fixing things around the house. When she saw me, her face lit up. There you are. She hugged me so tightly that I could barely breathe. I was worried you skipped lunch. Not a single word about herself. Not one. Always me. Always. I sat beside her. Mom. Mrs. Collins said you got lost. She looked confused. I wasn't lost. She pointed toward the road. I was waiting for your father. The words landed like stones in my chest. For a brief moment she looked around, almost embarrassed. Then she whispered. Oh. I forgot. That tiny sentence broke something inside me. I forgot. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. I'm getting silly in my old age. I forced a smile. It's okay. No. She reached for my hand. It isn't. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my mother's eyes. Not fear of dying. Fear of forgetting. The doctor confirmed what I had been trying not to believe. Early-stage dementia. Slowly progressing. There were medications that might help. Routines that could make things easier. But there was no cure. The doctor spoke kindly. She'll need increasing supervision. Rachel sat beside me, listening carefully. On the drive home, neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she said what both of us had been thinking. She can't stay alone anymore. I nodded. I know. We could move her in. I looked at her. You mean that? She hesitated. I want to. That pause said everything. We had 2 teenage children. A demanding business. A house that always felt noisy. Rachel wasn't being cruel. She was being honest. Mom would need constant care. Our lives were already stretched thin. Over the next few weeks, we tried everything. I hired a full-time caregiver. Installed cameras. Bought emergency alert devices. Set reminders for medication. Prepared meals. Labeled cabinets. Made schedules. Every solution worked. Until Mom forgot why it existed. She unplugged the cameras because she thought strangers were watching. She removed the medication reminders because they looked messy. She left the stove on twice. Once she placed the television remote inside the refrigerator. Another day she spent an entire afternoon searching for her wedding ring. It was already on her finger. The caregivers called me almost daily. She keeps apologizing. For what? For being difficult. Every single time. One caregiver told me something I have never forgotten. Your mother thanks me every time I leave. So? Daniel, she thanks me for not giving up on her. That sentence followed me home. One Saturday I arrived unexpectedly. The house was unusually quiet. I found Mom sitting in the living room holding an old photo album. She smiled when she saw me. I was looking at your first birthday. She carefully turned the page. There I was. Tiny. Covered in chocolate frosting. Laughing so hard my cheeks looked ready to burst. You cried because the candle scared you. She laughed. So your father pretended to blow it out with his nose. I laughed too. I don't remember. Of course you don't. She smiled. But I do. Page after page. Every birthday. Every school picture. Every scraped knee. Every missing tooth. Every handmade card. Every little victory that I had forgotten decades ago. She remembered all of it. Or at least, she remembered enough. Then suddenly she stopped turning pages. Her fingers rested on an empty plastic sleeve. There should be a picture here. She frowned. I know there should. She searched the album again. Growing more frustrated. I can't remember. Her hands began to shake. I'm sorry. She kept apologizing to me. As though forgetting a photograph was something she had done to hurt me. I gently closed the album. It's okay. She looked down at her lap. No. Her voice cracked. I don't want to forget your face. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. You won't. I already am. Silence filled the room. Then she did something she hadn't done since I was a child. She reached up. Placed both hands on my cheeks. And studied my face carefully. Her thumbs traced the lines beside my eyes. She smiled sadly. I'm trying to memorize you again. I couldn't speak. She continued quietly. So if tomorrow is a bad day, I'll still know how much I love you. I had never felt so small. Never. That night I barely slept. Rachel found me sitting alone in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. You're thinking about the nursing home. I didn't answer. Because silence was answer enough. She sat beside me. I know you don't want to. I promised Dad I'd take care of her. You are. It doesn't feel like it. Rachel reached across the table. Sometimes taking care of someone means admitting you can't do everything alone. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom standing at the end of that street, waiting for a man who had been gone for 15 years. Still believing he was coming home. A week later, I scheduled a visit to one of the nicest nursing homes in the county. The building was beautiful. Bright gardens. Kind nurses. Warm smiles. Residents laughing during bingo. Everyone kept telling me, this is the best place for her. Maybe it was. But as I walked through those spotless hallways, one question kept echoing in my mind. If this place was so wonderful, why did it feel like my heart was breaking with every step? And deep down, without admitting it to anyone, I already knew that no matter how beautiful the building was, my mother would never mistake it for home. The day I took my mother to the nursing home, she only asked me one question. It wasn't, why are you doing this? It wasn't, don't you love me anymore? It wasn't even, can I stay? Instead, she looked out the car window, smiled softly, and asked, should I lock the front door, or are we coming back later? I still hear those words every night. Because I lied. And she believed me. The morning we left her house was strangely peaceful. The sun poured through the kitchen window, lighting up the little breakfast table where she'd served thousands of meals over the years. Mom woke up early, just like always. By the time I arrived, she'd already made coffee. Or at least, she'd tried. She had forgotten to add the coffee grounds. The pot was filled with nothing but hot water. When she realized it, she laughed. I guess I've invented a new recipe. I laughed too. Neither of us wanted the silence to win. She stood in the hallway, looking at the framed photographs one by one. Her fingers rested on every frame just a little longer than usual. This one was your first day of school. She smiled. You cried because you didn't want me to leave. I nodded. I remember. No, you don't. She chuckled. You've forgotten. Then she winked. But mothers never do. I swallowed hard. She had no idea that before the day ended, it would be me leaving her behind. Packing didn't take long. That was the cruelest part. A whole lifetime reduced to one small suitcase. 3 dresses. A sweater Dad had bought her 25 years earlier. A pair of slippers. Her favorite Bible. Reading glasses. Family photographs. A tiny music box that played the lullaby she used to sing to me. She held that music box in her hands for a long time. Your father gave me this after you were born. She wound the key. The melody filled the quiet room. Without thinking, she began humming along. The same tune she'd sung when I had nightmares. The same tune that made every fear disappear when I was 5 years old. I closed my eyes. For just a second. I wasn't 46 anymore. I was a little boy again. Safe. Loved. Protected. Before leaving, Mom walked slowly through every room. She touched the kitchen counter. The living room curtains. The old rocking chair where Dad used to read newspapers every Sunday morning. Then she stopped beside the front door. She rested her hand on the wall. What are you doing? I asked. She smiled. I'm saying goodbye. I frowned. We'll visit. Of course. She nodded. I know. But something in her eyes told me. She knew more than I did. The drive was quiet. The radio stayed off. Mom watched trees pass by outside the window. After several miles, she spoke. Your father loved this road. I smiled faintly. He always drove too slowly. She laughed. And you always complained. I still would. She laughed harder. For one beautiful moment. It felt like nothing had changed. Then she reached into her purse. I made you something. She handed me a small paper bag. Inside was a peanut butter sandwich. I stared at it. She smiled proudly. I know how busy you are. My throat tightened. When you're hungry, you'll remember to eat. Even now. On the day I was taking her away. She was still trying to take care of me. I couldn't speak. I simply nodded. She noticed my eyes filling with tears. Oh, sweetheart. She reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Don't worry so much. Imagine that. The woman losing her home. Comforting the son who was taking it away. The nursing home looked exactly as I remembered. Beautiful gardens. Fresh flowers. Smiling staff. Everything clean. Everything perfect. Everything wrong. A nurse greeted us warmly. She knelt beside Mom. You must be Margaret. Mom smiled politely. I suppose I am. The nurse laughed gently. We're happy you're here. Mom looked around curiously. So many nice people. Then she whispered to me. Are they all visiting someone too? I couldn't answer. The nurse led us toward her room. It overlooked a small garden filled with roses. Mom smiled. Your father planted roses. I know. I used to talk to them. She laughed quietly. Sounds silly. No. I whispered. It doesn't. We unpacked together. She carefully folded each dress into the wardrobe. Placed the Bible beside the bed. Set the music box on the nightstand. Then she arranged our family photographs one by one. Me as a baby. My graduation. My wedding. The grandchildren. She stood back and smiled proudly. There. It feels more like home now. My chest ached. Because no amount of photographs could replace the life she'd left behind. Lunch was served in the dining hall. The nurses encouraged us to join everyone. Mom sat beside another elderly woman who introduced herself as Helen. Within minutes they were laughing. Helen couldn't remember where she'd put her glasses. They were hanging around her neck. Mom giggled. So that's where mine usually are. Everyone laughed. Even I did. For a brief moment. Hope slipped quietly into my heart. Maybe she'd be okay here. Maybe this really was the right decision. Maybe. Then lunch ended. Families began leaving. One by one. Hugs. Kisses. Promises. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll call tonight. I love you. The room slowly emptied. Residents waved goodbye. Some smiled. Some cried after their families disappeared through the doors. Mom watched every single goodbye. Then she looked at me. So. I forced a smile. I should probably get going. She nodded slowly. I figured. She walked with me to the entrance. Very slowly. Her walker clicked softly against the floor. Click. Pause. Click. Pause. Every sound felt like another second disappearing forever. At the front door, she stopped. She looked at me with the same gentle smile she'd worn my entire life. Should I lock the front door? She glanced behind her. Or are we coming back later? My heart shattered. I couldn't tell her the truth. I didn't have the courage. So I lied. We'll come back soon. She smiled with complete trust. I knew you wouldn't leave me. Those words nearly brought me to my knees. She hugged me. Not a quick hug. The kind mothers give when they think their child needs a little extra love. She kissed my forehead. Exactly like she used to before school. Then she whispered. Drive safely. I will. And don't skip dinner. I won't. She stepped back. I love you, sweetheart. I love you too, Mom. I turned around before she could see me crying. I reached my car. Opened the door. Sat behind the steering wheel. But I couldn't start the engine. Through the rearview mirror, I saw her. Still standing inside the glass entrance. Still smiling. Still waving. Still believing I would be back in just a little while. I raised my hand and waved back. Then I drove away. Halfway home, my phone rang. Unknown number. It was the nursing home. My heart stopped. Mr. Parker? Yes? We just wanted to let you know your mother is fine. I exhaled. She was just wondering. The nurse hesitated. What time you're coming back today? I pulled my car onto the side of the road. And for the first time since I was a little boy, I cried so hard that I couldn't even breathe. I told myself it would get easier. I told myself she'd adjust. I told myself I had done the loving thing. I believed those lies. Until 3 months later, when I returned to her old house to clean out the attic. Hidden beneath a dusty wooden chest, I found a small ribbon-tied box with my name written on it. Inside were dozens of sealed envelopes. One for every birthday of my life. And the first one I opened changed everything. The first letter was never meant to be found. It wasn't hidden because it contained money. It wasn't a family secret. It wasn't a confession. It was hidden because my mother never expected me to need proof that she loved me. But after I opened the first envelope, I realized she had spent my entire life writing to me, even during the years when I barely made time to answer her phone calls. And suddenly, every excuse I had ever made sounded painfully empty. 3 months had passed since Mom moved into the nursing home. I visited every Sunday. At least, that was the promise. Reality looked different. Some Sundays became every other Sunday. Business trips got in the way. School events for my children. Client emergencies. Life. That familiar word returned again. Life. The same word I had hidden behind for years. Every time I arrived, Mom greeted me with the same bright smile. Sometimes she remembered my name immediately. Sometimes she called me sweetheart because she couldn't. Once she introduced me to another resident. This is my brother. A few minutes later she laughed. Oh goodness. She looked embarrassed. You're my son. I smiled. I've been promoted and demoted all in one visit. She laughed so hard that other residents looked over. For a few precious seconds. It felt normal. Then she asked. Has your mother been here today? The question pierced straight through me. I answered softly. Yes. Good. She smiled. I hope she isn't lonely. She had become the very person she was asking about. And she didn't even know it. One rainy Saturday, Rachel suggested we finally clean out Mom's house. It's been sitting empty for months. She was right. The flowers in the garden had wilted. The mailbox leaned even farther to one side. The curtains stayed closed. The house looked like it was waiting for someone who had forgotten the way home. The moment I unlocked the front door, the familiar scent hit me. Cinnamon. Old books. Fresh linen. Home. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. A half-finished crossword puzzle sat beside her favorite chair. Reading glasses rested on top. A knitting basket still held the blue scarf she'd never finished. On the kitchen calendar, the last note she'd written was still hanging there. Daniel likes apple pie. Bake one Sunday. She had never crossed it off. Because that Sunday never came. Rachel and the kids helped pack dishes and old clothes. I volunteered to clean the attic. Mostly because I wanted to be alone. Dust floated through tiny beams of sunlight as I climbed the creaking stairs. The attic looked untouched. Boxes filled with Christmas ornaments. Old toys. Dad's fishing gear. Stacks of family photo albums. I smiled when I found my old baseball glove. The leather had cracked with age. I remembered begging Dad to buy it. Mom had secretly worked extra hours sewing dresses for neighbors so they could afford it. At the time, I thought miracles simply happened. Children rarely see the price parents quietly pay. Near the back of the attic stood an old cedar chest. I almost ignored it. It was tucked beneath a faded quilt. When I lifted the lid, I expected blankets. Instead, there was a small wooden box tied neatly with a pale blue ribbon. Across the top, written in Mom's familiar handwriting, were just 3 words. For Daniel. Nothing else. My hands trembled. I untied the ribbon. Inside lay dozens of envelopes. Perfectly stacked. Every one sealed. Every one dated. Age 1. Age 2. Age 3. All the way to age 46. Every birthday of my life. 46 letters. 46 years. I counted them twice because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Rachel climbed halfway up the attic stairs. You okay? I couldn't answer. I simply held up the box. She slowly sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. I picked up the first envelope. The paper had yellowed with time. The handwriting was younger. Stronger. I carefully opened it. Inside was one folded page. The date read, My precious Daniel's first birthday. I began reading aloud. My sweet little boy. Today you turned 1 year old. You spent more time smashing cake than eating it, and your father laughed so hard he almost dropped the camera. You won't remember today. So I'm writing it down for you. You reached for me every time someone else held you. Not because they weren't kind, but because I was home. I hope one day, no matter how old you become, you'll always know where home is. If someday I'm no longer here, I hope this letter reminds you that before you could even speak, you already had my whole heart. I stopped reading. The words blurred behind tears. Rachel quietly wiped her own eyes. Keep going. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I opened the envelope marked Age 10. My dear Daniel. Today you told me you're too old for bedtime stories. I smiled and said okay. But after you fell asleep, I sat beside your bed anyway. Not to tell a story. Just to watch you dream. Parents don't stop loving their children when children stop needing them. They simply learn to love more quietly. I covered my face with both hands. A sound escaped my throat that I hadn't made since Dad's funeral. Rachel wrapped her arms around me. Neither of us cared that dust covered our clothes. We sat there. 2 grown adults crying in an attic over letters written by a woman who had never asked for anything in return. I kept opening envelopes. Age 16. She wrote about teaching me to drive. She admitted she pretended not to notice when I scratched the car because she was more grateful I wasn't hurt. Age 18. She described watching me leave for college. She confessed she cried into my pillow after I drove away because it still smelled like my shampoo. Age 24. She wrote about my wedding. She thanked Rachel for loving me before she'd even truly gotten to know her. Age 31. The year my daughter was born. She wrote, Today I watched you become the father I always hoped you'd be. Your little girl wrapped her tiny fingers around yours exactly the way you once wrapped yours around mine. Life has a beautiful way of repeating love. Every letter carried the same warmth. The same pride. The same endless belief in me. Not once did she complain. Not once did she mention loneliness. Not once did she say she wished I'd visited more. Even during the years when I knew I hadn't. Then I reached the envelope marked Age 40. The year Dad would have turned 80. The year I missed my birthday entirely because I was overseas closing the biggest business deal of my career. I remembered calling Mom 3 days later. She answered immediately. As if she'd been waiting beside the phone. I opened the letter with shaking hands. Inside, her handwriting looked less steady. My darling son. You forgot your birthday this year. So I celebrated for both of us. I baked your favorite chocolate cake. The neighbors helped me eat it. I laughed more than I cried. Don't feel guilty if you ever read this. A mother's love isn't measured by how many birthdays her child remembers. It's measured by how many she never forgets. I saved you the biggest slice. Just in case you came. I broke. Completely. Because I remembered that birthday. I had promised her I'd stop by. She baked the cake anyway. She waited anyway. She believed anyway. And I never came. The attic spun around me. Every success I had ever been proud of suddenly felt meaningless. Every missed visit. Every unanswered call. Every hurried goodbye. Every maybe next weekend. They all came rushing back at once. Then, at the very bottom of the box, beneath every other envelope, lay one final letter. Unlike the others, it had no age written on it. Only 3 heartbreaking words. Open after goodbye. My hands froze. I stared at it for what felt like forever. Something inside me whispered that once I opened it, nothing about my life would ever be the same again. The last envelope wasn't sealed with glue. It was sealed with love, and with a goodbye my mother had prepared long before I was ready to hear it. I held the letter in my trembling hands for several minutes. The words written across the front seemed almost alive. Open after goodbye. Goodbye. She had written that word herself. Not after I pass away. Not when I'm gone. Just goodbye. Almost as if she knew there would come a day when she would leave my house before she ever left this world. Rachel quietly stood up. I'll give you some time. She kissed my forehead and disappeared down the attic stairs. I was alone. Alone with 46 years of my mother's heart spread across the dusty wooden floor. I slowly unfolded the final letter. The handwriting was shakier than any of the others. Some words leaned slightly to one side. Others looked as though she'd paused to steady her hand. I began reading. My dearest Daniel. If you're reading this, it means one of 2 things. Either I've forgotten where I put this box, or you finally found it after we've said goodbye to the life we once shared. If it's the second, please don't be angry with yourself. I have never wanted my life to become your burden. Children are supposed to grow forward. Parents are supposed to stay behind, smiling as they watch them go. That's how love works. My vision blurred. I wiped my eyes and continued. I know something has been worrying you for a long time. I see it every time you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. You're afraid you're failing me. Sweetheart. You never could. A tear landed directly on the page. I hurried to wipe it away. One day, you may have to choose a place where people can help take care of me. If that day comes, please don't mistake your heartbreak for betrayal. Sometimes love doesn't look like keeping someone close. Sometimes love looks like making the decision that hurts you the most because it's safest for them. I lowered the letter. I couldn't breathe. She had known. Before I ever made the decision. She had already forgiven me for it. I kept reading. If I forget your birthday someday, please remember that I celebrated every one before it. If I forget your name, please remember that saying it was once my favorite sound in the world. If I forget who I am, please never forget who you are. You are the little boy who reached for my hand whenever he was afraid. You'll always be him to me, even if my mind can no longer find the words. The letter slipped from my fingers. I buried my face in my hands. The sobs came so hard that my chest hurt. I cried for the little boy who had once believed his mother would live forever. I cried for the grown man who had mistaken being busy for being present. Most of all, I cried because she had spent her final healthy years comforting me for a pain I hadn't even felt yet. That evening, I drove straight to the nursing home. Not Sunday. Not according to schedule. Immediately. When I arrived, one of the nurses smiled. She's in the garden. I hurried outside. Mom sat beneath a large oak tree watching butterflies drift across the flowers. The setting sun painted everything gold. She looked peaceful. Fragile. Beautiful. She noticed me and smiled. Oh. You're here. I am. She patted the empty bench beside her. I was hoping someone would come visit. My heart cracked all over again. Someone. Not Daniel. Just. Someone. I sat beside her. For several minutes we simply watched the butterflies. Then I reached into my jacket. I found something. She tilted her head. What is it? The birthday letters. She stared at me. For a brief second. Something changed in her eyes. Recognition. Real recognition. You found them? I did. A tiny smile spread across her face. I wondered if you ever would. You remembered? She nodded slowly. I used to write. You wrote every single year. She laughed softly. I had a terrible memory. I frowned. You remembered everything. She shook her head. No. I remembered that memories disappear. So I wrote them down before they could. I looked away, trying not to cry. She gently touched my arm. Did they make you smile? They made me realize how much I missed. She squeezed my hand. No. You were busy living. I should have been here. You are here. I wasn't. You are now. Her words were so simple. Yet they carried more grace than I deserved. For the first time in years, I stopped apologizing. Instead, I listened. She pointed toward the roses. Those remind me of your father. She laughed. He was terrible at pruning them. I laughed too. He really was. And you inherited that. I know. We both laughed. A genuine laugh. The kind that arrives carrying tears with it. I began visiting every day. Not every week. Every day. Sometimes only for 30 minutes. Sometimes for hours. I started bringing dinner instead of eating at the office. We played cards. She forgot the rules halfway through every game. So we invented new ones. She cheated shamelessly. Then accused me of cheating. We laughed until the nurses laughed with us. One afternoon she insisted we race our walkers down the hallway. She counted. 1, 2, 3. She took exactly 2 tiny steps before bursting into laughter. I've won. You haven't even moved. Exactly. That's my strategy. For the first time in years, joy returned. Not because the illness disappeared, but because I finally stopped mourning the mother she used to be. And started loving the mother she still was. I brought my children every weekend. At first they were nervous. Grandma repeated stories. Asked the same questions. Forgot names. Then something beautiful happened. They stopped correcting her. Instead, they answered every question as though it were the first time she'd asked. Grandma would smile each time, thinking she'd learned something new. My daughter once whispered to me, "Dad, I think Grandma remembers love even when she forgets everything else." I looked across the room. Mom was holding my son's hand while telling him the same story she'd told him 4 times already. He smiled through every word. I nodded. Yes. I think you're right. But life has a way of reminding us that no matter how tightly we hold on, time never stops moving. And one cold winter morning, the phone rang before sunrise. This time, the nurse wasn't calling to tell me Mom was asking when I would visit. She was calling because It was finally time. At 4:17 that morning, my phone rang. Some calls change your schedule. Some change your life. This one changed who I was forever. The screen read, Rosewood Nursing Home. For one impossible second, I considered letting it ring. Not because I didn't care. Because deep down, I already knew. My hands trembled as I answered. Hello? The nurse's voice was gentle. Mr. Parker. There was a pause so heavy it felt like the world had stopped breathing. I think you should come now. I didn't ask why. I simply grabbed my keys and ran. The roads were nearly empty. Rain tapped against the windshield. Every traffic light felt cruel. Every red light stole another heartbeat. I kept whispering the same words over and over. Please wait. Please wait for me. I'll be there. For the first time in years. I wasn't late because of work. I wasn't delayed by meetings. I wasn't choosing something else. I was simply racing against time. And time had always been faster than me. When I reached the nursing home, the nurse was waiting by the entrance. She didn't have to say anything. Her eyes already had. I'm sorry. I stood frozen. The words refused to come. She gently placed a hand on my shoulder. She's still with us. Relief flooded through me so suddenly my knees almost gave out. But the nurse continued softly. I think she's been waiting for you. I hurried down the hallway. Every familiar picture on the walls blurred together. Every footstep echoed louder than the last. When I reached her room, the door was slightly open. Morning sunlight spilled through the window. Mom looked so peaceful. She seemed smaller than ever. Her breathing was slow. Gentle. Fragile. I walked to her bedside and took her hand. It felt cool. But when my fingers wrapped around hers, she squeezed back. Very lightly. Her eyes opened. Slowly. She looked at me. For a long moment. She simply stared. Then, something extraordinary happened. The confusion that had clouded her face for years seemed to drift away. Her eyes became clear. Bright. Present. Daniel. It had been months since she'd said my name without hesitation. I leaned closer. I'm here, Mom. She smiled. I knew you'd come. Tears streamed down my face. I'm sorry. So sorry. I should have spent more time with you. I should have answered every call. I should have visited more. I should have. She gently shook her head. No. One tiny word. One lifetime of forgiveness. You came. Her thumb moved slowly across the back of my hand, just as it had when I was a frightened little boy. That's enough. I cried harder than I ever thought possible. No, it isn't. I wasted so much time. She smiled. You loved me. I wasn't always there. But you loved me. I put you here. You brought me somewhere safe. I lied to you. You were trying to protect my heart. Every burden I had carried. She lifted with a single sentence. Not because I deserved it. Because she was my mother. She looked toward the window. The roses. I glanced outside. The garden was blooming despite the cold morning. They're beautiful. She smiled. Your father always said. She paused, searching for the words. Flowers don't bloom because someone watches them. They bloom because they were made to. Another pause. A mother's love is like that. You don't have to earn it. You simply receive it. A few minutes later, she whispered. Do you remember your 7th birthday? I laughed through my tears. No. You wanted a bicycle. I couldn't afford one. I remembered. Barely. I told you Santa was saving it for Christmas. She smiled mischievously. I worked every evening sewing dresses. So I could surprise you. I nodded, unable to speak. You rode that bicycle until the wheels fell off. I loved it. I loved you more. The room grew quiet again. After a while she looked at me with the same expression she'd worn every night before tucking me into bed. Are the children happy? Yes. Is Rachel still taking care of everyone before herself? I smiled. She is. Tell her. Mom paused to catch her breath. Thank you. I will. And Daniel? Yes? Don't wait until people are gone. To read the letters they've been writing with their lives. I frowned. She smiled gently. Not all letters are written on paper. Some are written in phone calls. In birthday cakes. In waiting by the window. In asking whether you've eaten. In saying, drive safely. She squeezed my hand one last time. So read them while you still can. Those words settled deep inside my soul. She closed her eyes. I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, she said, I think your father is here. I smiled through my tears. Then don't keep him waiting. A peaceful smile spread across her face. The kind of smile that belongs to someone finally going home. She took one gentle breath. Then another. Then silence. The room didn't become empty. It became full. Full of every bedtime story. Every birthday cake. Every scraped knee she had kissed. Every lunch she packed. Every hug. Every sacrifice. Every letter. Every silent prayer she'd ever whispered for me. The nurse quietly stepped inside. She looked at the clock. Then at me. I'm so sorry. I kissed Mom's forehead. It was the same place she'd kissed mine thousands of times. Thank you. Not goodbye. Thank you. Because goodbye could never contain everything she had given me. The funeral was small. Just family. Friends. Neighbors. Mrs. Collins stood beside me and smiled through her tears. Your mother talked about you every single day. I looked down. Even when I wasn't around? She laughed softly. Especially then. Weeks later, I couldn't bring myself to put the birthday letters away. Instead, I bought 46 simple wooden frames. Rachel thought I was decorating the hallway. In a way. I was. Each frame held one letter. One year. One memory. Our hallway became a timeline of love. Whenever my children walked past them, they stopped to read. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they asked questions about the grandmother they thought they knew. And every story brought her back into our home. Not as someone we had lost, but as someone still teaching us how to love. My life changed after that. The office closed earlier. Business could wait. Family couldn't. I never ignored another birthday. I answered calls even when I was busy. I visited people while they were alive instead of promising myself I would someday. Because someday has a terrible habit of becoming too late. Every year, on my birthday, I still bake a chocolate cake. Not because I'm celebrating getting older. Because somewhere in my heart, an 80-year-old woman is still smiling at me from a tiny blue kitchen. Still reminding me to eat. Still asking if I drove safely. Still loving me in the quiet, ordinary ways that only mothers can. And before I cut the first slice, I read one of her letters. Just one. It always feels like she's sitting across the table. Smiling. Waiting for me to finish. Then I write a new letter of my own. One for each of my children. Not because I expect them to find them someday. But because love should never be left unspoken. If they ever read them years from now, I hope they discover what I discovered too late. That the greatest inheritance a parent can leave isn't money. It isn't a house. It isn't jewelry. It's the certainty that, for every single day of their life, they were loved beyond measure. So if someone you love is still alive, call them. Visit them. Sit with them a little longer. Listen to the stories you've already heard 100 times. One day, you'll wish you could hear them just once more. And if you're lucky enough to have a mother who still asks whether you've eaten, answer her. Because one day, the phone will stop ringing. The birthday cake will no longer be waiting. And you'll realize that the most precious letters were never the ones folded inside envelopes. They were the ones she wrote every single day. Simply by loving you.